Welcome, adventurer. I see you found yourself in my study, one of the many rooms that can be found on your travels through the infinite staircase. Wreathed in living bark and crowned by lush foliage, the Treant stands as a testament to both the persistence and might of nature's design. Prepare to venture into the heart of the wild and uncover the ancient origins, solemn duties, and remarkable traits that set these towering guardians apart from all other creatures found throughout the multiverse. Treants are, at their root, trees given sentience. They serve as vigilant guardians of primeval forests and, in many settings, have existed for centuries, their roots intertwining with the terrain they protect. Legends describe them as arbiters of nature's unwritten law, bringing order to realms teeming with wildlife. Their presence deters poachers, dark magic, and other threats that might corrupt the woodlands they endeavour to protect. Though often peaceful, a Treant is no passive observer. Its strength surpasses that of many mortal champions, and it wields immense influence over the surrounding flora. When roused to defend its domain, the Treant can animate nearby trees and unleash a barrage of branch-like attacks. This formidable power, coupled with its profound connection to the natural world, places the Treant at the forefront of woodland creatures that strive to safeguard the wild places of the multiverse. Come with me now, over to the board of monsters, and let's take a look at the physical attributes of the Treant. A Treant typically stands on an extensive network of root-like feet, each resembling the thick buttresses that anchor ancient trees. These foot structures spread outwards in twisting arcs and ridges, granting remarkable stability on uneven terrain. They also possess minute, fibrous tendrils that burrow slightly into the soil, a feature that allows them to sense subtle vibrations and maintain a secure stance. Their lower trunk region displays gnarled bark marked by deep fissures and spiral motifs. These swirling patterns vary in colour, ranging from ashen grey to a moss-covered brown. They often bear clusters of fungal growths or pockets of lichen. Despite appearing rigid, the trunk has a pliable core that enables the Treant to bend slowly without splintering. Where a torso might be expected on a humanoid, the Treant's midsection is a broad, solid column of timber wrapped in living vines. These vines weave across the bark's surface in tight coils, occasionally forming loops that sprout leaves or blossoms in certain seasons. Embedded within this central area are knot-like formations that flex slightly when the Treant moves, suggesting the presence of muscular fibers adapted for a plant-based physiology. The creature's arms extend from thick branches that resemble robust boughs branching off of a massive oak. Each arm ends in a mass of finger-like twigs, suitable for grasping or manipulating objects with caution and surprising dexterity. The outer bark on these limbs is slightly smoother than that found on the trunk, yet it retains the distinct ridge and knot characteristics of aged wood. At the apex of the trunk emerges a discernible head, shaped by pronounced ridges and subtle variations in the bark. Two deep-set eye sockets, often illuminated by a gentle green glow, grant the Treant a slow but perceptive gaze. Below these eyes, a rough-hewn mouth cracks open in a vertical line, resembling a split in the trunk. During vocalization, the bark around this mouth creaks like tense branches in a breeze. Crowning the head, voluminous clusters of leaves fan out, forming a natural canopy that shifts in colour with the changing seasons. pale greens in spring, vibrant emeralds in summer, and burnished golds or reds in autumn. Among those devoted to cataloguing the many creatures of the multiverse, some have dared to quantify the Treant's abilities in calm, scholarly terms. These meticulous records come from researchers who believe that understanding each nuance of a monster's nature, be it physical, mental, or mystical, can grant defenders of the surface a better chance of survival. Such attempts to assign numbers and terms, an armor class, points of health, are observations made from learned minds who seek patterns in chaos. By tabulating these qualities, they hope to inform defenders who must one day stand before such creatures. The Treant is a huge plant, their nature chaotic good. They have an armor class of 16 with a hit point rating of 138. They are not particularly fast creatures given their size, only moving 30 feet per turn. What they lack in speed, however, is made up with in raw strength. Towering high with a strength stat of 23, anyone intending to get close enough to antagonize a Treant should do so with caution. Their dexterity sits at 8, which is pertinent for a sentient tree. A constitution of 23 means they are creatures of immense physical endurance. They will almost never get sick, even to the most virulent and deadly of diseases. Their intelligence comes in at a modest 12, suggesting a fairly logical creature, one capable of expressing their ideas clearly in multiple languages. A wisdom score of 16 means that Treants are often used as sources of advice. They noticed all but the subtlest of changes in people or situations and have sound judgment, their hunches rarely being wrong. And lastly, a charisma of 12 makes them mildly interesting or intimidating in social situations. They know the right thing to say to the right people to gain response, whether for good or bad purposes. Any given Treant has a damage vulnerability to fire, but resists damage in the forms of bludgeoning and piercing. It has a passive perception of 13, giving it an above-average ability to sense changes in its environment, and also can speak 4 languages, those being Common, Druidic, Elvish, and Sylvan. Treants have the traits False Appearance, allowing it to be indistinguishable from a normal tree, given it remains motionless, and Siege Monster, which means it deals double damage to objects and structures. Each turn, a Treant can make one of 4 actions. They can make a single target slam attack, which is a standard melee weapon attack with a reach of 5 feet and a +10 to hit. A ranged weapon attack in the form of a thrown rock. This attack has a range of 60 to 180 feet and targets a single opponent with a +10 to hit. They can multi-attack, which allows them to use slam twice on a single turn, or use their action on animate trees. This spell allows the Treant to magically animate 1 or 2 trees it can see within 60 feet of it. All the animated trees' stats are shared with the original, apart from their intelligence and charisma, which is lowered to 1. These trees remain animated unless one of these conditions is met. 1 day has passed since the casting of the spell. The animated Treants are more than 120 feet from the original, or the original Treant dies. They will also turn back into inanimate trees should the Treant take a bonus action to do so. The trees then take root back into the ground if possible. Because Treants originate from trees, they too come in a large variety. Treants that came into being within the elven forest of Cormanthor developed a symbiotic relationship with rot grubs, which lived off rotting wood. If a treant was affected by a disease known as tube wilt, which, once inside the treant, grew into a fungus that fed on the most tube-rich area, rotting would occur and usually cause death within a few months. A treant affected by tube wilt would open up a small crack in its bark and let the rot grubs in, allowing them to eat the fungi causing the disease. These grubs often remained within the treant for good and tackled subsequent rotting. Some of the largest treants could contain up to 100 rot grubs. In order to ward off predators such as woodchucks or wood-eating horses, treants within Cormanthor surrounded their roots with up to 6 Cormanthor violet fungi. These fungi tapped into the treant's root and were used as sustenance. They would also attempt to rot the flesh of any would-be predators. Creatures such as Asmodeus and large bats were encouraged to make their homes within the branches of Cormanthor treants. This was to combat the threat of bark beetles and leaf ants. Female treants used black squirrels to feed on their shoots, helping to limit treant population from expanding too much. Treants within the Rimwood area of Cormanthor displayed birch-like properties, their bark a bright white with long roots which seeked out water in the area. Their sap contained an aroma of lemon and mint, which was often used as a flavouring or perfume. Most of these treants also had rot grubs, black squirrels, Asmodeus, and purple fungi. Treants within the Midwood section of Cormanthor looked like golden willows and black locust trees. They protected themselves against brush rats using the violet fungi, and their bark could be boiled to make either golden or black dye, depending on their appearance. In the Starwood area of Cormanthor, treants looked like dark brown oaks and grey elms. Half of these treants were like most of their kind, peaceful. The other half were, however, quite hostile. The leaves of these treants could cure certain fevers and plagues. Treants inhabiting the jungles of Maztic were similar in appearance to those found in Faerun. Though they were not outwardly hostile to creatures foreign to their woods, they would rather ignore them altogether. These treants considered themselves to be royalty of the forests they inhabited, and expected other creatures to treat them as such, both by bringing grand gifts and addressing them according to their royal stature. Within many druidic societies, trees that were destined to become treants meditated through a long cycle of seasons that could last decades or centuries, awakening only under special circumstances. Druids and other treants could sense this spark of potential within trees and would protect them as they drew near to their moment of awakening. During this process, a tree's body gradually morphed, their trunk forming legs and their longest branches serving as arms. Adventurers may find themselves allied or opposed to a treant. A group of adventurers could be venturing into an ancient forest in search of a rare medicinal herb. Their expedition brings them to a shadowy glen blanketed by dense undergrowth, where they encounter a patient treant watching them from a distance, already aware of their presence through their vast interconnected roots. Sensing no malevolence, the towering guardian invites them closer, communicating through subtle creaks and rustles. In gratitude for the adventurer's respectful approach and shared care for nature, the treant may reveal the location of the coveted plant. It even might summon animated saplings to guide and protect the group on their hazardous journey back, forging a bond based on mutual trust and preservation of the wild. In another instance, an overzealous adventurer might begin chopping down sacred trees in a misguided attempt to harvest exotic lumber. This careless act provokes the forest's living sentinel, and the Treant emerges from the tree line, commanding vines to ensnare the intruder and calling upon nearby wildlife to repel the trespassers. Faced with the wrath of an outraged custodian of the forest, the adventurers must decide between standing down or leaving the forest forever, or clashing with an entity whose very essence is intertwined with the power of the land. A confrontation with such a mighty being can escalate quickly, turning what began as a humble resource-gathering foray into a mighty battle with an ancient of the wilds. The patron deity of Treants is known as Imantien-Sien, the god of Treants, and a member of the outer circle of Queen Titania's Seelie court, in which he acted as the court sage. His name, although long, was in fact a contraction of a much longer name in Treantish, which is the Treants' native language. The longer name, translated to common, reads, "One who is slow to rouse, but is great in might when stirred to action." Imantien-Sien was a god of few words. When he did speak, however, everyone paid attention, for his wisdom was great. Like most other Treants, he was chaotic good in his moral outlook. Avatars of Imantien-Sien could speak with animals and plants, and could animate trees, as could all Treants. Unlike other Treants, he had the ability to control flames at will, giving him control over his species' greatest threat. He also had the power to summon elder Treants to his side, and to bless one of them with enhanced spellcasting powers by interlocking branches with it. Imantien-Sien's connection to the ancient crystal via his roots allowed him to project a prismatic spray of magical power, or to create a phantasmical illusion that could destroy foes. He could do this once every several days. The crystal granted him some ancient powers that not even Titania possessed. He was immune to all enchantments and charms, illusions and paralyzation, and even though he could control flames, he was also weak to fire. He had access to all druidic magics, as well as spells of elemental earth and water typically used by wizards. Besides being a member of the outer court of the Seelie, Imantien-Sien was strongly allied with both Rilithane Ralathil, the elven god of nature, and Sylvanus, the Faerunian power of wild nature. The three would often carry long conversations on, discussing nature and the state of their world. Imantien-Sien was revered by chaotic good aligned Treants as a god of their people, and also of trees, and hidden magic. He was seen as an eternal being of wisdom, and his holy symbol was 2 acorns. Some elves of Faerun offered prayer to him along with their worship of Seldarin, as they did to other deities of the Fae people. Followers of Bayvan, Wild Wanderer, were known to work with the Treant priests of Imantien-Sien within the Forgotten Forest. Some of the most notable Treants throughout the multiverse other than Imantien-Sien were Sequaxion, an oak treant that stood only 8 feet tall and worked as a gardener in the Forest Inn, tending to the plants and wildlife surrounding it. He almost never wandered away from the garden, as the city of Ravensbluff generally didn't allow his kind to walk about freely. He moved at a deliberately slow pace, having been told by the inn's owner that humans didn't like trees that moved. As there were no other trees close to him, he sometimes animated the entire inn itself. There were the 7 seedlings of the verdant sages, a group of mythical immature offspring from the most ancient and wisest treants of the north. Adventurers hired by Celerum the Black disturbed a stone circle in a sacred druidic grove and were subsequently instructed by druids of the area to seek out the 7 seedlings of the verdant sages and return them, thus restoring the holiness of the grove and the stone circle. And finally, the treant known as Turlang guarded the northwestern region of the High Forest, a grove aptly named Turlang's Wood. He governed over this area of 100 or so trees with a gentle but authoritative presence. Turlang's most notable achievement was the attempt to halt the intrusion upon his woods by expanding the forest towards Everlund, with the end goal of having trees once again bordering the River Rauvin. After going to sleep sometime in the mid-13th century Dal reckoning, Turlang and his fellow Treants were roused less than 100 years later by a figure known as the Mistmaster, who made a deal with Turlang to help him seal off Hellgate Keep. He also took part in the defence of Erlang against the Orc hordes that erupted in the north in the Year of Terrible Anger. Over a century after the Hellgate was successfully sealed, Turlang was a wandering defender of the High Forest, having developed a mild case of xenophobia. He scared off unwanted intruders and would cease his wanderings only to take care of the Shadowtop Cathedral. Turlang carried a ring of major elemental resistance and scattered a wealth of valuable gemstones, raw gold, and silver ore throughout his home forest, which had been gathered from many invaders. Having explored the Treant's towering physique, examined its storied origins, and glimpsed its capacity for both peaceful alliance and formidable opposition, the majesty of these lumbering protectors stands well defined. Their deep-rooted connection to nature and their vital role in safeguarding forest realms reveals a profound aspect of the multiverse. Until next time, safe travels throughout the realms, and may your encounters with these ancient sentinels be ever enlightening.